Eli's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the hum of the old desktop filling the silence of the basement. It was 2013, and for a closeted teen in Boulder, the internet was a lifeline. The Chatroom, a relic of early online forums, was a safe haven where Eli could be himself without fear. His username, Moonbeam17, felt like a secret identity, one that let him shed the weight of his conservative high school and the expectations of his parents, who still thought he'd grow out of his phase. That night, a new message popped up from Starlight92. Hey, Moonbeam. You ever feel like you're stuck in a story someone else wrote for you? Eli's heart skipped. He typed back, all the time, like I'm waiting for the plot twist. Caleb's words flowed easily, sharp and warm, like he'd known Eli forever. They were both 16, both grappling with who they were in towns that didn't understand. Caleb lived in rural Ohio, where the closest thing to a queer community was the grainy VHS tapes of Will and Grace he'd sneak from the library. Over weeks, their late-night chats became a ritual sharing music. Caleb loved Florence and the Machine. Eli was obsessed with Tegan and Sarah, confessing fears and dreaming of escape. Caleb wanted to design buildings that touched the sky. Eli dreamed of writing stories that changed hearts. I'll get out of here someday, Caleb typed one night, his words glowing on Eli's screen. Maybe we'll meet in a big city. You'll be some famous writer, and I'll build you a house with a view. Eli laughed, his chest tight with something he couldn't name. Deal. But it better have a huge library. They never exchanged real names or photos too risky in a world where being out could mean being ostracized. But their connection was real, raw, a thread tying them across state lines. For months, they were each other's anchor. Then, one night, Caleb didn't log on. Days turned to weeks, and Starlight92 vanished. Eli checked the chatroom obsessively, but the silence was deafening. Life moved on. High school, college, coming out, but the ghost of Caleb lingered. A what-if that haunted Eli's quieter moments. 10 years later, Eli Parker stood in a sleek San Francisco office, adjusting his tie in the reflection of a glass conference room. At 26, he was the youngest hiring manager at Bright Future, a tech startup focused on sustainable design. His life was a far cry from that basement in Boulder. He'd come out at 18, moved to California for college, and carved out a career that let him shape the world in small, meaningful ways. But the pressure of his new role weighed heavy. Today's interviews would decide the lead architect for a major project, and Eli needed someone exceptional. The receptionist buzzed him. Your 2PM is here. Caleb Nguyen. Eli glanced at the resume on his desk. Caleb Nguyen, 26, Ohio native, MIT grad with a portfolio of innovative designs. Impressive, but Eli barely skimmed it before heading to the lobby. He extended a hand to the man waiting, a tall figure with soft black curls, warm brown eyes, and a nervous smile that hit Eli like a freight train. Hi, I'm Eli Parker, he said, his voice steady despite the sudden racing of his pulse. Something about this man felt familiar, like a song he hadn't heard in years. Caleb, the man replied, shaking Eli's hand. His grip was firm, but his eyes widened for a split second, a flicker of recognition Eli couldn't place. Thanks for having me. They walked to the conference room, the city skyline sprawling beyond the glass. Eli launched into the interview, asking about Caleb's experience, his approach to sustainable design, his vision for the project. Caleb answered with confidence, his passion for architecture shining through. He spoke of structures that blended with nature, of spaces that told stories. Eli found himself leaning forward, drawn in by Caleb's quiet intensity. But there was something else, a nagging sense of déjà vu. Halfway through, Eli asked, "What got you into architecture?" Caleb paused, his fingers tightening around his portfolio. "When I was a kid, I used to sketch buildings to escape. I'd imagine places where people like me could be free. It started as a dream, but it became my life. Eli's breath caught. The words echoed something buried deep, something from late-night chats a decade ago. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the next question, but his mind raced. Could it be? No, it was impossible. Starlight 92 was a ghost, a memory. As the interview wrapped, Caleb stood, offering a shy smile. This felt different, like we've talked before. Eli froze, his heart pounding. Yeah, he said softly. Maybe we have. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the office fading into the background. Eli wanted to ask, to dig into the impossible coincidence, but the next candidate was waiting. He walked Caleb to the elevator, their goodbye polite but charged. As the doors closed, Caleb's eyes lingered on Eli's, and something unspoken passed between them, a question neither dared to voice. Back at his desk, Eli pulled up Caleb's resume again, scanning for clues. Ohio. MIT. Nothing definitive, but the pieces were starting to align. He opened his laptop and, on a whim, searched for the old chatroom. It was long gone, but the memory of Starlight 92 burned bright. Had Caleb been sitting across from him, unaware of their shared past? Or had he known and said nothing? Eli's phone buzzed, a reminder of the next interview. He pushed the thought of Caleb aside, but it clung to him, a thread pulling him back to a time when he'd felt truly seen. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. Caleb Nguyen stepped out of the elevator and into the San Francisco afternoon, the city's pulse thrumming around him. The interview had left him unsteady, not because of the questions those he'd nailed, but because of Eli. The name, the voice, the way his hazel eyes seemed to search Caleb's face for something more than answers. It was like stepping into a dream he'd buried years ago. Caleb had grown up in a small Ohio town where being different was a quiet kind of rebellion. At 16, the internet was his only window to a world where he could be himself. The chatroom had been a sanctuary, and Moonbeam 17 Eli had been his safe harbor. Their conversations were a lifeline, each message a brick in the foundation of who Caleb wanted to become. He'd sketch buildings in his notebook while they chatted, imagining a future where he could live openly, maybe even with someone like Eli. But then his father found the chat logs. The fallout was swift-grounded, computer confiscated, and a lecture about fixing him that left Caleb hollow. By the time he got online again, the chatroom was a ghost town, and Moonbeam 17 was gone. Life had moved on. Caleb threw himself into school, earned a scholarship to MIT, and built a career designing structures that made people feel something. He'd come out in college, found a community, but the memory of Moonbeam 17 stayed with him, a fleeting connection that felt like home. Now, standing in San Francisco, he wondered if Eli Parker could be him. The thought was absurd, but Caleb's gut screamed otherwise. He found a cafe near the office and ordered a coffee, his mind replaying the interview. Eli's questions had been sharp, but there was a warmth to them, a curiosity that felt personal. Caleb pulled out his phone and searched for Eli Parker online. LinkedIn, a few articles about bright future, a photo of Eli at a sustainability conference, smiling in a way that made Caleb's chest ache. Was it possible? He typed a draft email, then deleted it. What would he even say? Hey, were you a random teen I met online a decade ago? Instead, he texted his best friend, Maya, who'd known him since MIT. Just had a job interview. I think the guy might be someone I knew when I was a kid. Like, really knew. Her reply was instant. Spill. Now. Caleb hesitated, then typed. It's probably nothing. But he felt familiar. Like we've got history. Maya's response was a string of hard eyes emojis. Go find out. Dummy. You don't get second chances like this. Back at Bright Future, Eli was drowning in paperwork but couldn't focus. Caleb's words kept looping in his head, places where people like me could be free. It was too specific, too close to the dreams they'd shared in that chat room. He needed to know. He pulled up Caleb's portfolio again, studying the design's sleek, sustainable buildings that felt like they carried a story. One project, a community center in Boston, had a quote in the description, "For those who need a place to belong." Eli's breath hitched. It was the kind of thing Starlight 92 would have said. He opened his email and started typing. "Caleb, great meeting you today. I'd love to discuss your portfolio further. Coffee tomorrow." He hit send before he could overthink it, his heart racing like he was 16 again. The next morning, Caleb arrived at the cafe first, his nerves jangling. When Eli walked in, wearing a casual sweater instead of a suit, Caleb's doubts melted. It was him, Moonbeam 17, grown up, real, standing in front of him. "Hi," Eli said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I hope this isn't weird, but I feel like we've met before." Caleb's throat tightened. He could play it safe, keep it professional, but Maya's words echoed in his head. "This might sound crazy," he said, his voice low, "but were you ever Moonbeam 17? Eli's eyes widened, and for a moment, the world stopped. "Starlight 92. He whispered. They stared at each other, the weight of a decade crashing down. Then Eli laughed, a sound full of relief and disbelief. "Holy shit. It's you." The cafe became their time capsule, hours slipping away as they pieced together the past. Caleb explained his father's discovery, the forced disconnection. Eli shared how he'd waited for Starlight 92 until the chatroom shut down. They laughed, teared up, and marveled at the absurdity of it all. Two kids who'd found each other in the dark, now sitting across a table in a city they'd both dreamed of escaping to. But the joy was tinged with tension. Eli was Caleb's potential boss, and Bright Future had strict policies about workplace relationships. The job was Caleb's dream, but so was this reconnecting with the boy who'd made him feel seen when no one else had. As they left the cafe, Eli's hand brushed Caleb's, a fleeting touch that sent sparks through them both. "We should talk again," Eli said, his voice careful but hopeful. Caleb nodded, his heart full and terrified. "Yeah, we should." The San Francisco fog rolled in that evening, wrapping the city in a soft haze as Caleb walked home. His mind was a tangle of Eli's laugh, the warmth of his hand, and the impossible reality of their reunion. But the job loomed large. Could he risk everything for a connection that might not survive the weight of their past? Over the next week, Eli and Caleb met whenever they could. Lunch breaks, late-night walks along the Embarcadero, stolen moments that felt like stealing time itself. Each conversation peeled back another layer of who they'd become. Eli was still the dreamer Caleb remembered, but now he carried a quiet strength, shaped by years of fighting for his place in a world that didn't always accept him. Caleb, too, had changed. His shy teenage self had grown into someone who built things, who believed in creating spaces where people could belong. One evening, they sat on a bench overlooking the bay, the Golden Gate Bridge shrouded in mist. Eli turned to Caleb, his expression serious. "I need to be upfront. If you get this job and you're the top candidate, things get complicated. I can't date someone I supervise. It's a conflict of interest." Caleb's stomach dropped. "So what are we doing here, Eli?" "I don't know," Eli admitted, running a hand through his hair. "I just know I don't want to lose you again." The words hung between them, heavy with promise and risk. Caleb wanted the job, needed it to prove to himself he'd made it out of Ohio for a reason. But Eli was more than a memory. Now was real, and the pull between them was undeniable. "Let's not decide anything yet," Caleb said finally. "Let's just see where this goes." Eli nodded, but the uncertainty lingered. They walked back to Caleb's apartment, their shoulders brushing, each touch a reminder of what they stood to lose. At Bright Future, the hiring process moved forward. Eli recused himself from the final decision to avoid bias, leaving it to his team. Caleb's portfolio was a standout, but another candidate, a seasoned architect from Seattle, was a close contender. Eli tried to stay neutral, but every time he passed Caleb's resume on his desk, his heart ached. He wanted Caleb to succeed, but he also wanted them whatever they could be. One night, Caleb invited Eli to his apartment for dinner. It was a risk, blurring the line between professional and personal, but Caleb couldn't resist. He cooked simple pasta with homemade sauce, a recipe he'd learned in college, and they sat at his small kitchen table, the city lights twinkling outside. "You're good at this," Eli said, gesturing to the food. "Any other hidden talents?" Caleb grinned. "I can still sketch a mean building. Want to see?" He pulled out a sketchbook, flipping to a drawing of a glass-walled community center, its lines flowing like a river. Eli traced the page with his finger, his voice soft. "This is beautiful. It's like you're building homes for people's souls." Caleb blushed, the compliment hitting deeper than Eli knew. They talked late into the night, about their dreams, their fears, the years they'd lost. When Eli stood to leave, Caleb caught his hand. "Stay?" Caleb said, his voice barely above a whisper. Eli hesitated, the rules of Bright Future flashing in his mind. But the look in Caleb's eyes, hopeful, vulnerable, undid him. He stayed. The next morning, they woke tangled in each other's arms, the weight of their choice settling in. Caleb traced circles on Eli's back, his voice quiet. "What happens now?" Eli sighed. "We keep this quiet until the hiring decision is made. If you get the job, we figure out how to make it work. If you don't," he trailed off, unwilling to finish the thought. Caleb nodded, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. He wanted to believe they could have it all: the job, each other, a future. But the world wasn't that simple, and he knew it. The days blurred into a delicate dance of secrecy and longing. Caleb and Eli stole moments where they could: coffee runs, quiet evenings at Caleb's apartment, each encounter deepening their connection. But the looming hiring decision cast a shadow, a reminder that their reunion might come at a cost. Caleb threw himself into preparing for the final round of interviews, a presentation to Bright Future's board. He spent nights refining his designs, pouring his heart into a proposal for a sustainable community hub that could redefine the city's skyline. Eli offered feedback when he could, careful to keep their professional interactions above board. But every glance they shared in the office felt like a secret, a spark that threatened to ignite. One afternoon, Maya visited Caleb, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. "So, how's your mystery man?" Caleb laughed, stirring sugar into his coffee. "It's complicated. He's my interviewer, Maya. If I get this job, we can't be together. Not openly." Maya raised an eyebrow. "And if you don't get it?" "Then I lose my dream job," Caleb said, his voice tight. "But maybe I get him." She leaned forward, her tone serious. "You deserve both, Caleb. Don't let some corporate rulebook tell you otherwise." Her words stayed with him, fueling his resolve. He wanted to believe they could find a way, but doubt crept in. What if Eli chose his career over them? What if Caleb had to choose between his dream and his heart? Eli, meanwhile, was grappling with his own demons. He loved his job, had fought hard to earn his place at Bright Future. But Caleb was a piece of his past he'd never let go of, a connection that felt like fate. He confided in his coworker, Sarah, who'd become a close friend. "It's messy," Eli admitted over drinks at a quiet bar. "I can't be objective about him. He's Starlight 92. Sarah's eyes widened. "The Chatroom guy?" "Eli, that's incredible. But you know what this means. If he gets the job, you're in a tough spot. I know, Eli said, staring into his glass. But I can't walk away from him again. Sarah squeezed his hand. Then fight for it. Talk to HR. See if there's a way to reassign you or him to different teams. Eli nodded, but the idea felt like a gamble. Bright Future was progressive, but policies were policies. He spent the next day researching options, meeting with HR to discuss hypothetical scenarios without naming Caleb. The response was cautious. Relationships between supervisors and direct reports were frowned upon, but lateral moves might be possible. The night before Caleb's presentation, they met at a park near the office, the city lights reflecting off the water. Caleb was nervous, his hands fidgeting with a pen. Tomorrow's make or break, he said. If I screw this up, I lose everything. Eli took his hand, squeezing it gently. You won't. Your designs are incredible. You're incredible. Caleb looked at him, his eyes searching. And us? What happens if I get it? Eli swallowed hard. I'm working on it. I talked to HR. There might be a way to shift roles so we're not in each other's chain of command. Caleb's face softened, hope flickering. You'd do that for me. For us, Eli corrected, pulling him close. They stood there, wrapped in each other. The future uncertain, but theirs to fight for. The presentation was a triumph. Caleb's vision for the community hub, a blend of green tech and inclusive design, left the board in awe. Eli watched from the back, his chest swelling with pride. When the board chair shook Caleb's hand, Eli knew Caleb had the job. But as the room cleared, reality settled in. They had a chance, but it wouldn't be easy. Eli caught Caleb's eye across the room, a silent promise passing between them. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The email came 2 days later. Caleb was officially offered the lead architect position at Bright Future. He stared at the screen, his heart a mix of triumph and terror. He'd done it, landed his dream job in a city he loved. But the victory felt incomplete without knowing where he and Eli stood. Caleb called Eli that evening, his voice shaky. I got it. Eli's laugh was warm through the phone. I knew you would. You killed that presentation. Thanks, Caleb said, pausing. But what now? About us. Eli was quiet for a moment. Meet me at the office tomorrow. I have an idea. The next day, Eli led Caleb to a quiet conference room, a stack of papers in his hand. I pitched a restructuring plan to HR, he said, spreading out the documents. If they approve it, I'd move to a parallel team, same level, different focus. You'd report to someone else. No conflict. Caleb's eyes widened. You'd give up your role for me. Not giving it up, Eli said, his voice firm. Just shifting things around. I want this job, but I want you more. Caleb's throat tightened, and he pulled Eli into a hug, the papers crumpling between them. You're insane, he whispered, laughing through tears. Only for you, Eli murmured, his lips brushing Caleb's forehead. The plan wasn't foolproof. HR needed time to review, and there was no guarantee the board would agree. In the meantime, Caleb started at Bright Future, diving into the Community Hub project with a passion that impressed his new team. Eli kept his distance at work, their interactions professional but charged with unspoken longing. They saved their real moments for after-hours dinners at hole-in-the-wall restaurants, walks through Golden Gate Park, nights spent tangled in each other's arms. But the secrecy took its toll. Caleb hated pretending Eli was just a colleague, and Eli struggled with the guilt of bending rules he'd always followed. One night, over takeout in Eli's apartment, Caleb voiced the fear that had been growing. What if they say no to the restructuring? What then? Eli set down his chopsticks, his expression serious. Then we figure out another way. I'm not losing you again. Caleb. Not after 10 years. Caleb wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered. He'd fought too hard to build his career, and Eli had his own battles. Could they really have it all? A week later, HR called Eli in for a meeting. The restructuring was approved. With conditions, Eli would move to a new sustainability outreach team, and Caleb would report to a senior architect. It wasn't perfect. Eli's new role came with less direct influence, but it meant they could be together, openly, without risking their jobs. Eli found Caleb in the office break room, a grin splitting his face. "We did it," he said, pulling Caleb into a quick, careful hug. "We're free." Caleb's relief was palpable, but a new fear crept in. Being open meant being vulnerable. San Francisco was progressive, but the world wasn't always kind. He thought of his father's anger all those years ago, the shame that had driven him offline. Could he handle that again? Eli seemed to sense his hesitation. That night, he took Caleb to a rooftop bar, the city sprawling beneath them. "Whatever comes next," Eli said, taking Caleb's hand. "We face it together. Deal?" Caleb squeezed his hand, his heart full. Deal. With the restructuring in place, Caleb and Eli began to build a life together. They were cautious at first, keeping their relationship low-key at work. But outside the office, they were unstoppable. Weekends were spent exploring the city, brunch in the Castro, hikes in Marin, quiet nights sketching and writing side by side. For the first time, Caleb felt like he was living the life he dreamed of at 16. But the past has a way of catching up. One morning, Caleb got a call from his mother. His father was sick, cancer. Advanced, and wanted to see him. Caleb hadn't spoken to his father in years, not since the fight that ended their relationship. The thought of going back to Ohio filled him with dread. But Eli insisted on coming along. "You don't have to do this alone," Eli said, packing a bag. "We're a team now." The trip to Ohio was a study in contrasts. Caleb's hometown felt smaller than he remembered, the fields stretching endlessly under a gray sky. His father, once a towering figure, was frail, his eyes clouded with regret. The visit was tense, old wounds reopening, but Eli's presence grounded Caleb. When his father tried to apologize, stumbling over words about understanding now, Caleb listened but didn't forgive. Not yet. Back in San Francisco, the trip left Caleb shaken. He threw himself into work, his designs for the community hub taking on new depth, infused with the pain and hope of his past. Eli noticed the change. The way Caleb's sketches carried a raw edge. "You're turning your story into something beautiful," Eli told him one night, flipping through Caleb's latest drawings. Caleb smiled, but his heart was heavy. "I want to believe I can move past it. But sometimes it feels like I'm still that scared kid." Eli pulled him close. "You're not. You're the man who built a life from nothing. And I'm here, every step." At Bright Future, the Community Hub project gained momentum. Caleb's designs were praised in industry circles, and Eli's new role in outreach gave him a platform to advocate for inclusive spaces. They worked together where they could, their shared vision a quiet rebellion against the world that had once tried to silence them. But not everyone was supportive. A senior board member, skeptical of the restructuring, began questioning Eli's decisions, hinting at favoritism. Whispers spread in the office, and Caleb felt the weight of scrutiny. One day, a coworker confronted him in the break room. "Is it true you and Eli are together? That's why he pushed for you, right?" Caleb's face burned, but he kept his voice steady. "I got this job because of my work. Eli and I are together, but that's not your business." The coworker backed off, but the incident rattled Caleb. He told Eli that night, expecting him to be angry. Instead, Eli laughed. "Let them talk. We've got nothing to hide." Caleb wished he could be that confident. The whispers reminded him of Ohio, of the fear that had kept him silent for so long. But Eli's unwavering belief in them gave him strength. They were building something real, and no one could take that away. The community hub opened on a crisp spring morning, its glass walls gleaming under the San Francisco sun. Caleb stood at the entrance, Eli by his side, as the mayor cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered. But for Caleb, the real victory was the man next to him, the one who'd believed in him since they were 16, typing dreams into a chat room. The months leading up to the opening had tested them. The board members' skepticism escalated, culminating in a formal complaint about Eli's restructuring. An investigation followed, tense and invasive, but HR found no evidence of misconduct. Eli's transparency about their relationship, coupled with Caleb's undeniable talent, silenced the critics. Still, the ordeal left scars. Caleb struggled with the public scrutiny, while Eli wrestled with the fear of losing his career. One night, as they lay in bed, Caleb voiced the question that had haunted him. Was it worth it? All this risk. For us? Eli turned to him, his eyes fierce. You're worth everything. I'd do it all again. Caleb kissed him, the weight of their journey settling into something solid, unbreakable. They'd face the world and come out stronger. The hub became a beacon for the community, a place where people of all identities could gather, create, and belong. Caleb's designs were lauded in architectural journals, and Eli's outreach efforts drew national attention. They were a team, not just in love, but in purpose, building a legacy that echoed the dreams they'd shared a decade ago. On the one-year anniversary of their reunion, Eli took Caleb to the rooftop where they'd made their pact. The city sparkled below, a testament to their resilience. Eli pulled a small box from his pocket, his hands trembling. Caleb and Gwen, he said, kneeling. You're my Starlight 92. My home. My everything. Will you marry me? Caleb's laugh was half a sob as he pulled Eli up, kissing him fiercely. Yes. 1,000 times. Yes. The wedding was small, held in the community hub's garden, surrounded by friends, family, and the spaces they'd built together. Maya gave a toast, teasing Caleb about his teenage crush on Moonbeam 17. Sarah spoke of Eli's courage, his refusal to let fear win. Even Caleb's mother attended, her presence a quiet step toward healing. As they danced under the stars, Eli whispered, "We made it, didn't we?" Caleb nodded, his heart full. "We did. And we're just getting started." Their story wasn't perfect, no one's is. But it was theirs, forged in the glow of a chat room, tempered by years of loss and reunion, and sealed with a promise to keep building. Together, no matter what came next.